Mark Addery read the resumes sent in by applicants for the position of caregiver. He owned a huge fortune with several houses abroad, but he was not in the main in good health. 2 years ago, Mark had been in a traffic accident, suffered a spinal injury, and had to sit in a wheelchair. So the first applicant is Camille Schubert, 32 years old. Medical degree, work experience. Worked in a hospital, including nursing. I'm not bedridden, thank God. Reading another resume, thought Addery. Seems okay. There is a daughter 2 years small, but not a sprout. Apparently, she really needs a job. All right, I'll see what kind of relative the composer is. Have the manager call, invite her in for
an interview. The next day, his manager Williams called the applicant. She's here with her daughter. Why did you bring a baby? The manager reprimanded her. Who goes to business meetings with small children?
I have no one to leave with, and I wrote about it in my resume, the age of the child specified immediately. And yet your employer called me back. Are you sure all good professionals don't have infants? I don't think I swore. I swore an oath not to repeat myself in nature. I'm sure, Camille replied. Well, babies are your business. What's that to me? If it suits the master, it suits me all the more. Williams took offense for some reason. Camille was an ethnic German whose family had been exiled to Kazakhstan. After all the political twists and turns in the country, she returned to Russia. But her relatives did not want to leave their long-abandoned places. Some already had their own business. Some were used to the climate and life of Kazakhstan. And some returned to their historical homeland in Germany after the lifting of the Iron Curtain.
Camille, on the other hand, wanted to get her medical education and diploma in Russia. She didn't get enough points in the institute, but she entered the medical school at once on the nursing department. She planned to go to university, but life, as always, made its corrections. Camille was not considered a beauty in the classical sense, but her eyes were large, sky blue, seemingly huge. On a thin face, they held some secret or memories of past centuries. And also in them appeared wisdom, despite the young age of their owner. Slender figure and low height complemented the image of a girl of the 19th century. Some ridiculous wind brought into the 21st. However, despite her external fragility, Camille had a strong character, in a good sense stubbornness and firmness of spirit. This does not mean that the girl was uncompromising, fanatical. There was no idea of any kind.
Simply, unlike many young women of her time, she really had principles, which she followed even in those cases when she wanted to give herself a slack. For example, she knew exactly that you cannot have a relationship with a married man, sabotage where you live and work, denouncing coworkers to superiors, denying help to those who are worse off than you. Now with her husband, Stephen. Camille met while working at the hospital. Right after graduation, he was a patient of hers. Stephen broke his leg while skiing at a Siberian ski resort. This Kuzbas mountain cluster is second only to its counterpart in Sochi in terms of the number and variety of slopes, and is considered the first in Russia in terms of free ride. Stephen worked there as an instructor, teaching some rich, capricious ladies how to ski. How did you end up like this, Stephen? Camille asked Stephen while I was dressing him. The guy, by the way, was a real looker, as a sportsman should be. Tall, clean, well-built. Hollywood actor's face. You're a professional. I can understand a little snot. First time skiing. But you've been an instructor for years. Camille, my dear. Vysotsky sang that mountains do not forgive mistakes, neglect and unpreparedness of tourists, sometimes severely punishing their guests. And I would add vodka, jam, smoke breaks. In my case, whiskey, vodka, whiskey, smoke breaks. Jesus, Stephen, what are you talking about? Not myself, of course. Camille, your ladies, did you have whiskey? I tried to talk them out of going for a walk in their condition, but no way! They started yelling that they were going to complain to my management. And his postulate is that the customer is always right. So I had to pay for the cynicism of my director, the beastliness of these women with my own health. In this case, a fractured tibia. It's also called a skier's fracture, by the way. I was lucky I had a doctor nearby. He was skiing with his family because blood loss and shin fractures can reach a liter. So I could have died. And there have been cases like this in the history of instructors. If there was no rapid evacuation, no proper treatment, there's also traumatic shock. When I fell, I also tore my knee pads, hitting the fossa under the knee, where the main vessels and nerves pass. It was just a scratch. I got away with it. Serious injury in 90% of cases leads to gangrene. Wow. What are you going to do after the hospital with an injury like that? It'll take at least 6 months to recover, if not more. I will definitely not return to this base as an instructor. My superiors didn't even give me compensation for my injury. Everyone was shaking so that these ladies wouldn't complain to their retainers. One of them has a lover who's the deputy governor for some kind of investment in something. I'll tell you how it happened, but let's use your first name. I hate poking. Some party worker or teacher makes you feel like you're 100 years old. Sure, Camille laughed. I don't like it either, to be honest. There's not much to tell. One of the girls took off her skis and asked someone for a girlfriend. I had no time to even say or do anything, and she was already running on this tire at breakneck speed. I must say that the tire has no braking system. It rolls wherever it wants. If at the end of the journey on this form of suicidal transportation, God forbid, there are trees, the brake will be a leg, an arm, or even a head. As it happens. There are times when people have broken their spines too. When I saw that my client is running straight to the forest, which was at the bottom of the mountain, rushed after her on skis, managed at the last moment to grab the rope. Bingo! I don't know how. It was like it was in slow motion. Mwop. But this jerk flipped over with the skis. Instead of calling an ambulance at the base, they all have administrators' numbers. She started taking pictures and saying, "How cruel! Everyone will fall off when she sees it." I wouldn't call her a bitch. I'd call her something worse. That's amazing cynicism. I'm speechless. Shaking her head, Camille replied. From then on, they began to communicate. Camille avoided her colleague during her shifts by 2 or 3 times, bringing something homemade delicious. The guy was not from the Siberian region. His relatives lived far away, and he did not upset his elderly parents with the message that he was in hospital. He's alive and thank God. He'll think of something else. Why did he quit such a supposedly prestigious and well-paid job? Camille, do you have a crush on the instructor? Her co-workers were making fun of her at lunch. So you're not getting too deep into this, Stephen? It's not the first time we've had him. And make sure it's one of our girls, like Emily teaches the girls, remember Lisa? She worked for us about 3 years ago. Quiet little mouse, almost a little bored, but she was beautiful. I can't help it. Of course we do. Yes, Wendy. Yes. And third side to another co-worker, the girl responded. Laughing peasant girl's carcass. There was some murky history there. Emily is from a family of Siberian old believers, ran away right out of the forest where they lived. She wasn't allowed to smoke or wear normal clothes. All in rags. The old ladies all ran away and ate God knows what. You can't watch TV with the guys until after the wedding. Nonsense, by the way. They have young men with beards, as my grandmother used to say. Beard and mustache are lice, snot. To which I parried her grease ball to tease the old lady. She was a party girl. What about Marx and Engels? Both girls laughed. And what did she say? That Marx and Engels had beards, and our janitor Vasily had lice and snot. But that's not what I'm talking about. I got distracted. Anyway, Emily ran away from her family, went to medical school. They gave her a dorm. She went to school, but her mom came to visit her once. I saw her. We went to school together. The woman was only 40, Lesya told me later, but she looked 60. She wore a floor-length skirt of some TV color, a scarf, no makeup, and eyebrows like Brezhnev's. The girl cried and said her father wouldn't take her back home.
Well, it's while she was studying. At least she stopped praying every night like a lunatic. And I started dressing more or less like a human being. And then Stephen came to our hospital. We'd only been here the first year he and I were nurses together,
But he started messing with her head. You said she was beautiful, you couldn't take your eyes off her. Hair, black eyes, eyebrows, and facial features like an icon. You could paint the Virgin Mary on her. So, how did he start messing with her? Did he just talk to her? Well, he's a sociable person. By virtue of his profession, he needs to be able to get people talking. Camille asked her about it. He'd already checked out, was up to the stick, gave flowers and everything. She blossomed right before her eyes. And then he disappeared, stopped coming here. Emily went black, and then suddenly quit and disappeared from our sight. Didn't leave us an address. Her cell phone's out of range. I don't know what happened between them, but it's weird. More than weird. Wendy intervened because just before she disappeared, I saw Emily wearing a ring, a gold one, by the way, with a small sapphire on her ring finger. I was very surprised that it wasn't a cheap gift. Where'd she get the money from? Her parents won't send it. For sapphire rings already? Right, I asked her. Who got what? She got all bloomy and said, I'm getting married soon. To Stephen, was it? She didn't say who, but no one else went to her. And her old believers. Assuming that's the case, sapphires and gold don't give their brides unless they're made of small pine. What kind of ring or wood? Come on, you peasants. You can't go after the old believers. Every hut has its rattles. No one dragged you there by force, and no one invited you to visit. But the story is really very strange, Camille summarized. And she felt heavy. During the month that Stephen had been with them, she had fallen in love with him. He was soon to be discharged, and he invited the girl for a date at his house. Immediately after writing, Camille was not embarrassed by such an invitation. She had before Stephen a young man in Kazakhstan. They dated for a while, but then Camille realized that she did not love the guy and told him directly about it. He calmly took the turn from the gate and quickly found comfort in the face of her friend. But how to go now? I'd have to ask Stephen. What's the story with the vocabulary? Yeah, it's embarrassing to say the least. Gossip gathers before you know it. But in the end, the girl decided to talk. That night, she was just on duty on a heavy-duty shift.
Yes, and the duty itself passed quietly, without accidents, fires, and stabbings. She assured T and invited Stephen to the residency. About an hour or two, there was sure to be no one there. He rejoiced, apparently having misunderstood the girl, and almost immediately proceeded to kiss her. Stephen Waite gently pushed him away. Camille, I like you very much too, but I am tormented by one thing. What is it? Stephen smiled. Will I marry you? Of course I will. We'll apply tomorrow. Don't be sarcastic, but here's the thing. Anyway, I accidentally found out about your relationship with our nurse Emily, who worked here. Tell me, why did you break up? And why did you break up so strangely? Where did she go? The girls say she hasn't been heard from for 2 years. She couldn't go back home. They wouldn't let her go to that old Czech village. She didn't have the money to go somewhere else and start all over again. And she was running away from someone, not you. The local gossip, Stephen shook his head. Of course, I'll tell you everything.
We did hang out with Emily, but only as friends. Poor girl had nowhere to put her head. I'm used to listening to different clients. Not only hysterical bitches come to our resort more often. There are quite adequate people. Even more often internally lonely, who have no one to talk to. At first, she didn't tell much about herself, but then she started talking about their way of life. Old believers, for example, cannot take food from strangers. That is, buy it at the store. You can imagine they have to grow everything themselves, so they grow some spreer. And Emily told me all this. Do you listen often? Stephen asked. Of course, very carefully, Camille replied. She really wanted to believe Stephen, but her inner controller told her that he was not entirely sincere. She had been interested in a video at school, and now she noticed the stiffness of his movements and his lack of gesticulation. Stephen had repetitions of the same phrases and an uneven pace of speech during his story. But in the end, she dismissed doubts in favor of the fact that the man was telling the truth. A woman's amorous heart is a great help in the search for truth. And Stephen went on. Emily had fallen in love. But her chosen one put her in charge of her head. As I now realize, I think he was married. Only she didn't want to admit it to me. For the first few months of their relationship, she was flying on wings. Then the hero lover disappeared, and she went completely blank. That's why you used to bring her flowers to work, see her off in the evening, and pretend you were the hero lover. Camille, and then your. There's no need for sarcasm. I was just covering for her, saving the girl's reputation. I mean, we became friends in that short period of time. That guy gave her a very expensive ether ring. He must have been rich. And Emily was incredibly beautiful and not spoiled by modern advantages, like most girls. Just a surprise for the greedy millionaires. A girl of model appearance, not tempted by men, and the benefits of civilization surprising do not want. The process of conquest is similar to the capture of the Spanish Indians. Gave beads of amber, took to the Bolshoi theater, and all. You are God from the church. With Camille, I'm just being reasonable. I speak the pure truth, and it, as we know, is often unsightly, especially in the naked version. All right. What happened next? Camille smiled. Emily disappeared. I saw her that evening, talking to her. She wasn't herself. She first was worried that her fiancé had stopped contacting her 3 days ago. I calmed her down as best I could. I told her that all men have these things, and rich men even more so. Maybe he had some problems with his competitors. Maybe something else. You name it. But, Emily, my exhortations were a dead giveaway. Either she knew something I didn't and didn't tell me, or she was so worried that she didn't have the strength to believe in the best. And in the morning, she was gone too. And there was a feeling that she just disappeared into thin air. By the way, Cuckoo's Sick did not tell you that she did not even take the labor card, and there is no calculation? Camille was surprised, and that the labor card has been lying here for 2 years. How do you know about that? Did you find out? I told you, we were friends. Emily didn't have anyone close to her in town but me. But there's There's nothing between us, believe me, honestly. Emily, as beautiful as she was not an object of lust for me. She was just a child. But do you remember her fiancé's name? Last name? Where was he from? Or didn't she tell you that either? Name? Look, it's not a common name. Moore? Mark. Right. Mark? But I don't remember the last name. Yeah? Pure detective, the girl said thoughtfully. They talked about various things. Then the ambulance brought in the patients and Stephen went to his room. Camille... went on duty. A week later, Addington was discharged, and 3 days later, Camille came to his house and stayed until morning. Pretty quickly, they realized that the two of them were good together. They have a lot in common, and most importantly, they look in the same directions. In married life, that's even more important than looking into each other's eyes. A couple of months later, Stephen got a job as a coach in a very decent sports center with a high salary. And he already had a place to live, and in the center of the city. They got married, and a year later, he gave birth. Quite quickly, it became clear that the girl has a congenital heart defect. Camille first went into a panic, raised the whole family in Germany to make her daughter an operation, but she was dissuaded by the chief doctor of the hospital where she worked. By the way, by this time, Camille had already been promoted to head nurse. Camille. Heart defects are statistically between 2 and 17 per 1,000 babies born. Christopher, the head doctor, exhorted her. The most common is a septal defect separating the ventricle. In addition to this anomaly, septal defect dividing the atria and open ductus arteriosus are common, and all of these are successfully treated today. Das Fazit. Often without extensive intervention. Moreover, even specialized drugs are not always required, because the baby can recover on its own. True, of course, true. Drinking peppermint tea is soothing? Add boiling water, soothed her chief. What does it depend on, wiping away traitorous tears? Camille asked. Heredity plays a big role. If one of your closest relatives has congenital heart disease, the need for a surgery may increase. It's more common for babies to be born to older parents and very young parents under 17. But this is not your and Stephen's case. Your rubella, you didn't get it when you first got pregnant, by the way. No, I've been immunized since childhood. Stephen was otherwise immunized too. He could have gotten the anti-fertility bonus. So calm down. Get a grip. You can't change the situation right now, no matter how much you want to. Oh, but you can accept it, learn to live with it, and fight it. See a cardiologist, pediatrician. Of course, conduct an examination. I repeat, very often in such children with age threshold decreases. In the meantime, you'll be prescribed medications to help relieve the increased stress on the heart. Thank you, Christopher. I'll be strong. At this point, the subject was only a year and a half old. Camille was on maternity leave, so at least she didn't have to quit her job. Otherwise, how would she run to doctors, take care of the baby, and even on call at night? But she didn't have to make that kind of sacrifice, thank God. Stephen made a decent living. It was enough not only for diapers and toys, but also for small pleasures. True, he periodically traveled on business trips, pulled on the highway to ride this or that rich client. And in recent months, it began to repeat with unpleasant regularity. Stephen was hardly ever at home. The money had gotten bigger by leaps and bounds. Stephen even had a new car, but that did not please Camille. They became distant somehow, and her husband was very nervous and delayed. In November, he left again, he said to the Meteor base. He promised to return in a week, but he didn't show up at home after 2. And just before he left, Camille Cathy's mother came to visit them from Kazakhstan. That was good for Camille. She asked her mother to stay for another week and decided to go to the base herself. She didn't like Stephen's short answers on the cell phone that the business trip had been delayed and that he wouldn't be able to call often. It was nonsense, Camille thought. Why the fuck can't he call me often? He's not at war, thank God, and he's not inventing in a secret lab. Something's not right. Okay, I'll take care of it. Mom, I won't be long before you come back. To be with the chemist? Of course I will. Just Camille, tell me. Did things work out with Stephen? I don't know, but I hope it's good, as long as our windows are broken cheek by jowl. And off I went without adventure. got to Kuzba, took a cab to Meteor, was already Euro 9 seer, and I went to the reception. Young lady, good morning. Where can I find Stephen Addington? She asked Addington. Why do you need him? He took a week's vacation. He's not at the hotel, the girl replied. Vacation? Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. We have only 3 instructors for all bases, and 2 have time to serve clients. And why does them? What does that surprise you? Who are you? I am his grandniece Marfa, already breaking into hysterics, answered Camille. Came to visit. We're not from around here, and we don't have an uncle. Can I rent a room here? And where to look for me now, uncle? Do you know? Can I get a room? Give me your passport. The girl looked at Camille with compassion, bewildered. And when she saw the last name, she was stunned. Wait, you're the wife? You're Camille. How do you know me? Don't you get nervous? My name is Evelyn. I'll give you a great room at 70% off. It's for the wife of an employee. It's almost a suite. And you're coming down to the cafe to join us. What's the location? I'll tell you everything. Except it's going to be unpleasant what I'm about to tell you. I'm sorry. Come on, it's not sugar. It's not easy. I can already see that it's going to be unpleasant what you tell me about my husband. He's seeing someone? Yes, but not of his own free will. It's like Camille. You come back in an hour. I'll turn in my shift, or I'll get in trouble. And she handed her the keys. The room was really nice. The interior, the view of the snow-capped mountains, bonuses in the form of shampoos, excellent towels, bathrobes, and soft slippers, minibar, and even a laptop with internet connection. It was a celebration of body and soul. She dialed her husband. It took a while to get through. Hello, Camille. Anything urgent? Stephen asked in the tone of a Soviet-era magician. No, I just wanted to hear your voice. Why? Apparently, Camille could not hide the anger and resentment in his voice, and it immediately determined not in vain he was a ladies' man. I'm very happy to hear from you too. Kitty's just very busy. Went without a day off like Papa Carlo got held up. There was music playing in the background, and someone was clinking glasses. Glasses or plates? Are you at the base? Sure. Where else would I be? That's what I was thinking of telling Camille. But instead she said, Run, of course, my little goat. She never called her husband that. And the girl's tone of voice was downright mocking. Stephen tried to ask something, but she had already passed out. An hour later, after taking a shower, putting on a fashionable suit, she went down to the bar and restaurant. There was hardly anyone around. The clock showed only 12 zags. Evelyn sat at a table with a cocktail. Let's call her I'm your age, she suggested. We're probably the same age, and this conversation is private enough. Of course, Evelyn, Camille agreed. Anyway, listen. Our hostess Jenna is a bitch. And not just any bitch. Everyone in the neighborhood calls her the Black Widow. She's already buried 3 husbands. She hasn't remarried since the last funeral. It's been 4 years. Afraid, I guess. But young men are very hungry for young men. And if they cling to someone, the man's gone. Until she lets go. She's already taking turns getting every member of the stronger sex into bed. Only she couldn't get your Stephen. And when she tried so hard, she wouldn't let him get away. First, she would invite him to a restaurant in the evening, under the pretext of discussing a new project. And he refused under the pretext of poor health. Then even once in the room, at part of the night to him in the bar. And given her size, it's not for the faint of heart.
Poor thing didn't know we were in Stephen's room that night to celebrate my birthday. So we were out late, otherwise he'd be in a world of hurt. Ours was on a date too. The size of the lady and the body, huh?
How old is she? She's not just in a body, she's got a body in her. And she's very left-handed. Or maybe she's the one with the mohawk. Right, Muzzle? She's doing all kinds of nip and tucks. 100%. Anyway, Steven opens the door. Nasha's playfully telling him she can't sleep. And I know so many lullaby songs. If I were Steven, I'd open the door wide so she could see us. We'd see her. But Steven took pity on her, on a purely human level. He went out into the corridor, closed the door quietly behind him, and, apparently, explained to her that he was not alone, and not to embarrass himself. Maybe he was afraid of revenge. He didn't see her. Imagine how embarrassing that would have been. But she'd be ashamed of himself as she was of me. And then he came back about 10 minutes later. But I guess the idea of conquering your husband never left Jenna. So, a month ago, we were all invited to a corporate party on the occasion of Jenna's birthday, which frankly is nonsense. She never usually invited anyone from her staff to her birthday party. You know, not a big deal. But here we were, put on a bus and brought to some fancy vacation home. There's a pompous restaurant, everything but us. They gathered employees from all the branches. We have 5 branches, so there were about 100 people. Wine, champagne flowed. They brought in stars from the Capitol as performers. Cool. Steven and I sat next to each other the whole time, just in case the madam didn't attack him, but I'm not going to the bathroom with him. And I was already drunk by then. Anyway, after an hour, I realized that there was no faith anywhere. I call. He drops out thinking, what the hell? And then I was there with a man with one twisted and somehow forgot about the flash drive. In the morning, there's a knock on the door. I open the door and he's white as chalk. He came in, asked me if I had a drink. Good thing it wasn't our shift. I poured him half a glass of whiskey, so he gulped it down and said, well, Evelyn, you're in trouble. I'm in trouble. What happened? What's wrong? Did you get Jenna in the sack? Forget it. Can't you just calm down now? Oh, Camille, I'm sorry. It's all right, tell me, Camille replied, and ordered herself a brandy to digest what she had heard, which apparently was only the beginning. But here he is saying it would be worse if he slept with her. Why would it be worse? I asked him. Well, he gives it away. Don't fall down. Hang in there, Camille, okay? He actually went to the restroom, then to the smoking room, and there's 2 stylish young men sitting there, talking about how lucky they are and how cool it is that you can play roulette here. When they saw Steven, they kind of shut up, changed the subject. As it later became clear, the whole thing horror searching, that was staged, set up, word for word. In the end, they invited him to play in a secret casino, where only the chosen ones are allowed. He went along with them. But Steven had never gambled before. It's strange that he agreed, Camille exclaimed. So there are such pros there. Even the angels of heaven, I think they can talk, so he lost $3 million to them for nothing. What? Camille's rubles. But still, where to get them? It's clear that Capello played with him, but you can't prove anything. There are serious people behind this business. And one of these serious people turned out to be my brother, who was very fond of my sister. They're from an orphanage.
Turns out their mother abandoned them. So she was the eldest and raised her brother like her mother. True, it did not prevent him a couple of times before the owner to go to places not so remote, but both of them had the grip of a bulldog. Jenna, by that time, has already promoted, and brother on the zone well warmed up. What happened next? Then he made Steven an offer he couldn't refuse. Either he gives him $3 million within a week, or marry his sister.
Otherwise, no hard feelings. I don't know what this criminal mastermind meant, but I think Steven was really scared. What do you mean, married? We're not divorced. The wedding is scheduled for the day after tomorrow, so you're probably divorced. You just don't know about it. They have connections everywhere.
I can't believe Our Lady's not afraid to remarry. Jenna's previous husbands died strangely.
The first one died in a traffic accident. The second one died of cancer within a year. And the last one was 7 years younger than her. She must have been really stuck on your Stephen. Evelyn. What the hell kind of connection? We have a 1.5-year-old daughter. So the only way to get a divorce is through the court. Ikbra. Where's her the courts and in my presence? The court has to decide who the child will stay with, where he'll live, who will pay child support. The exception is if one of the spouses is in jail and the term of imprisonment exceeds 3 years. Then if he is, pardon me, disabled or an idiot, or missing in action. I don't fit into any of those categories. This is outrageous. We're not living in the 90s. This is 2018. Camille. I don't know. It's like they say, what I bought is what I'm selling. I really feel for you. We're all in shock. Is it even ready? How come he didn't tell you anything? You, Evelyn. Where's the wedding? Getting a third glass of cognac and trying to pull himself together? Asked for Chmielewska. Not used to it, Camille. I'm more interested in the other thing that he so quickly gave up and agreed, if before that so desperately resisted. Maybe it wasn't like that. And they've been asleep for a long time. Do you have a picture of this poop of yours? The wedding at our restaurant. By the way, as for them being asleep before, I don't know. Maybe it really was all an act. But for who? For us? Well, we're small time. We don't care. I had no idea you'd come here, Addington. There's a picture, of course, from the corporate party. Look at this. Are you trying to ruin their party? Oh, really? Let us help you view Gio ear. Weder baksa stoi. You girls, if you need it. Evelyn handed Camille the cell phone for a photo, and she saw a really very full woman, smugly looking down on everyone, but quite attractive, it must be said. And she didn't look 40, by the way. About 30 or so at the most. Although a full lady keeps her face young for a long time, especially with good, expensive care and proper cosmetic procedures. Madam was wearing a gold dress with a floor-length neckline, emphasizing the beautiful breasts. And by the way, Stephen, standing on the right hand of Jenna, did not look unhappy, and certainly not raped. On the contrary, his face looked more like the face of a cat. Camille, who had been waiting for the free sour cream, began to feel nauseous from the amount she had drunk, from what she had seen in the photo, and from what she had heard from Evelyn. Evelyn, the only thing I'm capable of ruining right now is your table and your floor. I don't feel good. You walk me back to my room and tomorrow I'll figure out what's what. And thank you for the truth. I don't know how long my husband would have kept silent, driving me around, stealing my life, my health, my freedom. Oops, stood up Camille while she woke up. Evelyn picked her up under her arm and dragged her to the elevator. They reached the 4th floor where Camille was seated. Evelyn led her to the bathtub and stuck her new friend's head in the sink of cold water. Camille recovered, wiped herself off with a towel, and collapsed on the bed. Evelyn quietly closed the door with her key. She, as the receptionist, had all the duplicates and went to her room. Camille had a strange dream, like Stephen marrying a huge pig with a human head. And she, Camille, is a stylist. They are bedded down in some kind of wooden hut. Waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, she did not immediately realize where she was and why she reached for a bottle of mineral water. And gradually, the mundane reality brought her back to the world of the living. Here you are, grandmother, and faithful husband. Would you come mineral water with ice and lemon? Camille thought. Not for nothing when we first met. It was as if someone inside me stopped me from meeting this man, huh? Why, did you dream about a pig? So he and Jenna are 2 pigs. And I'm not going to cry for him. He's not a man, He's a walking comic book. He went into debt and got married. He's an asshole. Like there's no other options these days. The apartment could have been mortgaged to the bank and paid off gradually. But his holiday is ruined, of course. I'll make a present for the newlyweds. We just haven't figured out how. But like Scarlett said, I'll think about it tomorrow. Tomorrow. And she fell into a peaceful, restful sleep. No more dreams of pigs, no more ex-husbands. Into the morning, she started plotting her revenge. She came up with one and dialed Evelyn. Evelyn, where are the Gerster Serpi Dre? We're getting married, so which registry office? Camille, hi. Don't panic. They're getting married. No celebration yet. They're celebrating here the day after tomorrow. The girls told me. Our Jenna must be terrified of losing her prey. So, she's in a hurry. Don't worry about me, it's better this way. On the other hand, who's going to officiate the wedding? I'd like to switch places with the Toastmaster, at least at the beginning. It's all about the surprise effect. They don't need a horny elf costume like Angelina Jolie or Vicente. They have the money, they just need to make it now. A costume, a what? A horned elf. Don't you hear me? I'm a rich wife, so I have to fit in. Camille, maybe I should get you a sedative or some retired cognac. They'll be here in a minute. I understand you're in shock, stressed. Evelyn, I'm not in shock. I'm totally screwed. If you don't help me, the entire female species will be insulted. No revenge. You know, searching in this hell. I pay your trouble. 200,000 will do you good. Javier ran away from me and my daughter to get married so fast, he didn't even block his cards. He has two, both with 500,000, as it turns out. I've already withdrawn them all, so I've got the cash. He doesn't need the money now, though. He's got a rich wife. He's gonna need a cardiologist and a sexopathologist and a therapist in 3 months when his old lady's face is begging for it. Okay, 200 grand? But come on. Of course it's okay. I'll do anything. And not just for the money. It's for the honor of the women I'm treating in the first place. Camille got a call home from my mom. We felt fine. My daughter wasn't cranky and ate and slept well. Kathy was fine too. But like all mothers, of course, I felt that something had happened to Camille. And it wasn't one of life's happy moments. My girl, you're doing fine. Did you find Stephen? The lady found him just fine. He's on a business trip. To Dalney. I'll come and tell you all about it. Don't worry about me. The weather's good, the food's good, so far. It's unbelievable, but it's a fact. In the evening, the Toastmaster and the seamstress sat in Camille's room with a personal sewing machine and materials for the costume. The costume was being prepared for a premiere show, and Toastmasters could not make up her mind to agree to Camille's proposal. Even for the money she was offering, $300,000. Jenna hired me. Can you imagine what she'd do to me if I changed the script? They wouldn't hire me at any office in town. You'd have to start your own, and she won't do anything to you. They'll say so-and-so. Oh. A girl came in, said she went to college with Stephen, said she wanted to surprise him for the wedding. A special greeting that Stephen would love. And you didn't know it was Camille, his wife, and I guess you didn't know anything. All right, the Toastmaster named Wendy gave up, and they discussed Camille coming out from behind the stove. The costume was ready by morning. The crown and horns were made of leather and papier-mâché. Camille looked fabulous. She bought shoes with huge heels. As she was not a model herself, while she was trying them all on. Her cell phone rang. A picture of her now ex-husband popped up on the screen. Yes, honey. She sang in a honeyed voice into the receiver. Hi, how are you? In a strangely soulful voice, Stephen asked her, I'm waiting for you. You'll be home soon. I bought everything for your favorite pie. Put the dough. You'll be off for the weekend tomorrow, Camille. Camille continued her garden of masochism. Here's the thing. Anyway, I won't be home anytime soon. I've been offered a very lucrative contract for a year in another city. I have to go right away. I won't even have time to go home and pack. But they're going for. They're promising me very, very good money. Really? Camille was happy. They're sending me to war? What's that? They don't even let a man pack his things. And they won't let you see your 1.5-year-old daughter and say goodbye. Are you a political prisoner? 10 years without the right to correspond. But if the money's good, go, of course. Money is the most important thing, isn't it? Camille, what are you doing? Why are you even talking to me like that? Stephen, go, you know where you're going. And don't call me again. Camille disconnected the call and blocked the contact. Let her think what she wants. In any case, the fact that she would show up at his wedding as an elf with horns as a toastmaster would not occur to him, and she wasn't afraid of losing him anymore. He himself was lost of his own accord. By 12-hour noon, numerous cars began to arrive at the restaurant opposite the Meteor base, including the VIPs of the archive or young beautiful women, as well as obese and not very young men. Artists were carrying equipment. All in all, a bustle. A bustle of Satan's ball, Camille thought, standing at the window in her room and watching the action across the street. She had already put on a floor-length dress. The horned headdress was lying on the bed. Just in case, she had asked Evelyn to change her first and last name on the room checkout. There was little chance of that. Camille Addington, as well as Camille Schneider, given the slightest suspicion on Stephen's part as to her possible presence, would have exposed her instantly. Such coincidences do not happen, so Evelyn put her name down to the faceless Jenna. A white limousine pulled up. Jenna floated out of it in a lush lilac dress, followed by Stephen in a white suit. Camille's eyes blurred. Until the last moment, she had hoped in her heart that everything that was happening was a joke or a dream. She would wake up and everything would be as it was before. Quiet family happiness, their big cozy apartment, mommy with her dolls and the smell of apple pies from the kitchen. Her kitchen and pies for Stephen. Now, whose kitchen is this? And who are the pies for? And what are they for anyway? Camille picked up her horned helmet and headed downstairs. In 15 minutes, they had to start congratulating the youngsters. Evelyn and Wendy were already on the first floor. Where the hell have you been? You should be here by now. Come on, what's wrong with you? You're not wearing your face. Camille, maybe you don't have to, but what the hell is this plan? Evelyn's worried. It's okay, I'm going. Hello, dear guests. Camille stepped out into the middle of the room, and the guests applauded, seeing the almost real Maleficent. I flew from a faraway fairy tale forest to congratulate the young ones, to wish them happiness and long life. I am a fairy elf. My name is Camille. I've known Jenna's fiancé for a very long time. Everything Camille said, the guests took it as a script, including Sasha. No one in the audience knew the mayor by sight either. And about the fact that Stephen divorced urgently, leaving his wife and sick child, in general, only Jenna and her brother Do Family Lawyer knew. Wow, Stephen, did you come up with that character? You're good for me. I thank you so much at night. Broadcast the tipsy bride, not noticing that Stephen looked more like a dead man than a newlywed. White as chalk, he wiped the cold sweat from his face. Don't you dare raise your eyes, to Camille. And she continued to have fun, inviting the guests to play, to dance. And at last, she invited Stephen himself to a slow dance. He started to resist, but his new young wife sent him away. Stephen, I'm not jealous. What are you afraid? Of her? The young wife wanted it. And Stephen became Stephen. But hello, business travelers. When they went free fast or Hanarbessen? Then they went to the middle of the hall to dance, said Camille. You really have a long-term project, as I see. What the fuck are you doing, you son of a bitch, and unscrupulous? You didn't let me know about the divorce. What did you think I was going to keep you? I don't eat carrion either. Anyway, the papers were sent to me at our former address. He'll sign the apartment over to me, and you won't need it. If not, then we'll sue. And don't you dare go near your daughter. Terminated parental rights. And I'm not afraid of your new criminal in-laws. Your new wife? I should have listened to my gut the other day. But history does not bear the subjunctive mood. Good eye! She spat in Addington's face. He frantically pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and almost ran out of the hall. Camille also ducked into the restroom, where Wendy was already waiting for her to change into her carnival costume. No one but Stephen could see Camille's face anyway. Camille quickly put on jeans, a t-shirt, and a jacket. Her hair was gathered in a bundle. Dark glasses completed the look. She didn't dare to spend the night in her room. Her things were already in the luggage room. Guys, thank you for everything. I'll never forget what you've done for me. Hugging her new friends, she said, Call me any time of the day or night. I'm always here for you. And you call us, Camille. You're just a cattle prod and a fool. Besides, don't worry about him. He's not worth a fingernail. I'm not worried, wiping away a traitorous tear, Camille replied. She packed her bags, ordered a cab to the airport, and was home the next morning. Adriana was asleep. Mom was glowering in the kitchen. Arrived, all is well, but thank goodness. What about when they let him go? It's okay, Mom. And Stephen signed a long-term contract for 3 years. To Antarctica. It's a very dangerous expedition. He could be eaten. Pirjo, dod. Dios there. Polar bears, for example. Or rather, by female bears. Mommy, I'm going to bed. I'll tell you all about it later. I will. Okay, Kathy replied confusedly, realizing that her daughter was not doing well. And with a woman's instinct, she realized somehow that it wasn't good, because it had to do with Camille. Her boring busy his personal plan. But for many years of wandering, accustomed not to ask unnecessary questions in stressful situations, decided to wait until the daughter herself will tell everything. Besides, nobody canceled German calmness and long-suffering in her character. Only in the evening, Camille told her mother everything, finally letting her tears flow.
Kathy, who had seen a lot of things, was shocked by what she heard. What a horror! All she could say was, Camille, forget it like a bad dream. Forget as our grandmother forgot that they had to endure their time in exile, and it was hell. They were brought to Semipalatinsk in wagons, in which calves were transported. Can you imagine the level of comfort, the smell of manure? We slept on hay with the children. No food, but a pond of lice. The kids started getting sick. Where are the doctors in these treatment wagons coming from? And diseases are not just colds, typhus, from which there is nowhere to hide. True, at the big stations, my grandmother used to tell flatbread. The locals gave some hot soup.
It was a real holiday. According to the instruction of the NKVD of the USSR, on the order of the eviction, it was allowed to take household goods, small household implements, money. Not much, but nobody had much. The total weight of all things, clothes and equipment, should not exceed 1 ton per family. Well, what am I saying? All things pass, my daughter, and this too will pass. She patted Camille on the head. Do you have Adriana? I do. Any family left in Kazakhstan? Come back to us if you want. No, Mom, I need us. You're going to medical school? To have access to quality medical care. If the threshold doesn't suddenly close, she'll have a lifetime of it. She's gonna want a baby of her own someday. How do you have a baby with a heart defect? Tomorrow I'll call my head doctor and ask for a trip to a sanatorium where children like them are given preventive care. Do you have the money? Virusov didn't say anything about me giving him the 100,000 SARS I withdrew from his cards. So that's enough for the first time, and then I'll think of something. God gave me a child. God will give me a child. Jesus, what about you? How do you know this wonderful saying? You're only 20? You know what kind of grandmothers we have here sometimes. One time we had a real bride-to-be from the countryside in the ER. How many stories did she tell? She treated people with herbs, but she got a hypertensive crisis when she was running after each of hers. That's when the fox was torn by a fool. They were both horny. Just for a second, 80 years old. You can't tell from her looks. She's about 65 at the most. She's thin, she's quick, she's got this energy, like young. Interesting. Well, that's good. I see that you've made up your mind, and I'll go home quietly, because my father has already given up. Every day he calls 3 times a day, says he's bored without me. No one to fight with, and there's no one to take his favorite girl away from him either. That's right, Camille smiled at her mother. The next day, she called her head doctor, Christopher, and asked for a trip. He, of course, did not refuse her. They had a good, trusting relationship between the professional employee and her senior fellow, mentor, and supervisor. Already in a week, she and her mom checked into a great room. Highly qualified professionals worked with the girl and did everything that they needed to do. One day, a very beautiful young girl, with a boy the same age as Camille's daughter, was next to them. Dark hair and eyes, correct facial features. And the boy was almost a complete copy of his mother. The women got to talking and got to know each other. Camille, she introduced herself. Adriana's daughter's name is Emily. Answered a new acquaintance, and this is my son Sashenka. The weather was beautiful outside, and having finished the procedures, the women went for a walk. It turned out that Alex's father also abandoned her and Emily, not even knowing that he had a son. The man had suddenly disappeared just a month before the wedding, even though he and Emily had planned to apply. Where do you work? Camille asked her new acquaintance. I work here at the sanatorium. It's just that I have a convenient place to live now, and Sasha gets all the necessary procedures and medicines for free. I'm a nurse. I used to work in the city hospital number 5, somewhere. Camille is still vaguely building up something, a puzzle in her head. There was a sense of deja vu. City hospital number 5. Why are you surprised? Because I work there too. I'm a nurse too, but I'm older now. Yeah, that's a coincidence. And the head doctor is still Christopher. Such a great guy. Yeah, Camille smiled. And then it hit her. Emily is very pretty, dark-haired. She sang 2 years ago. Holy shit, so this must be the same Emily from a family of old believers. Oh my god, Camille decided to go tricky, and as if unintentionally opened the photo bank on her cell phone, where the There was a picture of Steven, and dropped the phone on the grass. Camille, your cell phone fell down. Oh, who's that? Steven, she summarized confusedly. You know, literally, for the first time in person. Emily asked Camille. Yes, he was lying here and helping me. We became friends right away. What's he to you? A relative? Oh, related to my ex-husband and my father. Listen, let's go to my room. I've got deluxe floors. We'll put the kids to bed and we'll talk. We got a lot to talk about. Let's go. In the room, Camille told Emily her story and waited for her to be honest with her. But she was depressed, silent, gathering her thoughts. Finally, she began her story. It was my day off, and I went to the movies. I didn't know anyone in town except Steven.
But he was lying with a fracture, so he couldn't be my partner. I bought tickets for the penultimate row when the lights went out. A little late for my row, it was completely empty. There were only 5 people in the theater itself.
I went early in the morning. A young man sat down. We watched the cartoon The Secret Life of Pets, and he laughed so sincerely, like a child. After the session, when the lights came on, he turned his head and looked at me like that. He offered me a coffee at the same mall where the movie theater was located, and I went, you know. We talked for about 3 hours. I didn't have much to tell him, though.
I didn't want to burden him with my childhood of wooden toys. I think you've been told that. What family? I'm not ignorant of it. And then what happened? And then we started dating. He never came to the hospital to see me. I asked him to. Why not? My mom once came to me secretly from my father on the pretext of needing to buy blood pressure medicine, although we do not welcome it. It's treated with herbs. But in some cases, they can allow it if the cases are severe. We have a grandmother paternal mom. By the way, then I did not give my soul to God, so he allowed it. A mother after all. So I was afraid my dad would somehow find out where I worked. At least I'd just run away from home if he caught me and Mark. He could kill me. He's very emotional, not temperate. Even though he's an old believer. Mark. His friend's name was Mark. Yeah, Mark Adary is a millionaire, as it turns out. His house is huge, tons of stuff. But I didn't care about that. I grew up in the woods. I can live in very Spartan conditions. I loved him very much, and I still do, even though he left me. What makes you think he left you? Camille asked. It was Mark Adary. Mark Adary! Some tragedy about him. It was all over the internet. And it was 2 years ago. Stop! Car accident. Head-on collision. The city's most handsome and most eligible bachelor at 33 is in a wheelchair. That's right. Why? Emily, meanwhile, answered. He disappeared the day before we were supposed to file the registry office. And I told him we were having a baby. I wanted to surprise him and tell him after we'd submitted the application, so it wouldn't look like I was dragging him to the registry office for the baby. But he disappeared. His cell phone was unavailable. I've been calling all week. Obviously, he changed his mind. Why would he want me? Maybe if he knew about his son, he'd do something to help. Even if he hadn't gotten married, I don't blame him. I got into bed with him before I got married, so I'm the one to blame. I decided to have a child for myself. I sold the ring. It was expensive. And I left the city for this sanatorium here. I saw an ad for vacancies. How did you get it without a labor card? You left her at the hospital. Whoa, it's your fault. She was in bed before the wedding. Emily, I realize that you've been raised in a special environment, but you've got to be a little smart. What the hell are you talking about right now? This is the 21st century. Why did you throw away your SIM card? No one could call you. Camille, how could I stay? If my family found out I'd given birth, I'd have no choice. They would have let me carry my son to term and give birth too. But then to sort of free face, no, and within. They'd take him away and send me to take care of the cattle. Up to 5 years as punishment. Then he wouldn't even realize who he was. We're very strict. I didn't run away from home for nothing. I got the job on my diploma.
I said that I had work experience, but that I used to work in a private clinic, and they didn't make it official so that I wouldn't have to pay taxes. They believed me. I'm a really good nurse before the case. Now, read about your Mark. And Camille moved the laptop to Emily, opening an article from 2 years ago about a terrible accident. When Emily read the article, there was no face on it. Camille, I'm such an idiot. I should have gone to his house then.
But I decided if he didn't come to the registry office, why should I? Did I ask Camille to go to his house? He needs help now, for God's sake. and she sobbed.
Quietly, the children woke up. My son was frightened. Now we'll think about how to fix the situation and how you can get to him so you don't look like that snow on your head after 2 years. I think he figured you didn't need him in a wheelchair. He didn't know anything about his son. So, love to the grave through. Anita Sodir, Paul, you're the grave. Both fools. Only love for the rest of their own complexes, as is often the case, not for each other. So let's open his VKC page, see what's new. Whoa, Emily, look, he needs a live-in caregiver. That's lucky. That's lucky. Yeah, very lucky. I'm just the man for the job. We should get ready. Emily, I'm sorry, but are you stupid? How do you expect to be his caregiver? I mean, we just talked about this, and we have to get together in a week when our kids are fully prophylactic. Oh, what about it? I'll rent a cabin near his mansion for you. In the meantime, I'll send out my resume, of course. And have you decided whether to resign or take a leave of absence? There's money to live on until your Mark and I reconcile. And I beg to differ, rest assured, even though you didn't quarrel, but just flooded. And I think you won't have to come back here as a nurse with a small salary. By the way, I've read a lot about your Adari in my time. Decent man. A week later, they left the sanatorium, and Camille received an invitation for an interview. She asked the head doctor for his support beforehand, asking him to give her recommendations if he was asked for any, promising to tell her everything afterwards. Intrigued? Christopher, of course, had promised her that little, and now she sat across from Adari, eyeing the man curiously. And he, her straight nose, gray eyes framed by thick, girl-like lashes, square chin, broad shoulders. Mark was sitting in a wheelchair, his legs covered with plaid, and he didn't look flawed, macho, Camille thought. I looked at your resume, called your old place of employment. They speak very highly of you. I'm ready to hire you on a probationary basis at a salary of $100,000 a month. That's fine. That's fine. Mark. Mark Adary was raised in a wealthy, yet creative family. His father was in business, and his mother worked in the theater as an assistant artistic director for the literary part. Simply put, this position was called for departure. In their large house, located outside the city, there were always many guests of entrepreneurs, actors, singers, writers, and those close to the first and second. Little Mark, his older sister Rose, had almost complete freedom of movement. In any case, they were allowed to go to bed after 3 on the territory of the mansion and the garden, with a vegetable garden and outbuildings. And it was great. There were always cats, dogs, a parrot, and guinea pigs in the house. The animals were cared for by Grandma Sophie, here a cousin of Mark and Rose's father's mother. Having lost her husband early and having no children, he moved her from Odessa to Siberia. And despite the drastic change of climate, to the minus side. Sophie liked it here. 30 years ago, barbaric felling of trees in Siberia was not yet put on a wide footing, so in winter there were strong but dry frosts, and in summer, pleasant heat. Not like now, when the weather in every season has a real climax with wild temperature differences in winter from 2 to 20, and not typical for the region icy winds, and in summer, terrible humidity and stuffiness, from which the only salvation is in air conditioners. But not everyone has this luxury item in their apartments. Children were spoiled, and first of all by attention and correct personal example. Although at first glance it might seem that it was not so at all. But Mark and Rose saw how much their parents are passionate about their own business. How their eyes light up when their mother, for example, discussing a new play with colleagues, and their father the expansion of the company. He was in the printing business, publishing a newspaper and a magazine, and also helping young authors. Works of the most talented he replicated at his own expense, risking to lose profits from sales, But this never happened. All father's protégés went forward with 7-mile strides, and eventually became famous throughout the country, each in his genre. So the eldest was such a free startup for many in the career of a writer or journalist. Upon graduation, Rose unexpectedly enrolled in law school at one of the most prestigious universities in the region. Without asking for help from parents, graduating from university, she opened her own law firm and took on the most hopeless cases of those clients who a priori did not have the money to pay her cool colleagues. Many people twisted their fingers at the temple when discussing the elder Aderi, considering her a philanthropist. But she didn't care. She didn't die of hunger. Her father gave her money to start the business, and she was very grateful to him for that. I consider the help of parents, if they had such an opportunity, to be absolutely normal. Unlike some of her classmates who tried to portray independenters, contemptuously rejecting the financial support of wealthy parents to start a business, but at the same time quite calmly accepting gifts in the form of expensive cars, cards with accounts, trips to the Maldives and jewelry. That's really a double standard, Rose thought. Of course, she took in money clients under the protection, but only if she was 200% sure that they were framed them, or the circumstances were such that there was no criminal intent in their actions. Mark loved his sister dearly, and she loved him back. They'd been friends since childhood. He followed in the footsteps of both his mother and father, opening the Kirov Center, where he created creative platforms for gifted children and youth. He helped them find sponsorship. In fact, he produced them in different areas of music, vocal, drawing, writing, and dancing. The selection process was tough for Reap, though, because you had to be sure not even in the genius of the participants he chose, but that they had the psycho-emotional strength and patience to see it through. Mark was not a philanthropist. As for his character, Mark Aderi's personality could be characterized by one-word perfectionist. He also had one romantic hobby, which he could not refuse. Role-playing games, unlike reconstructors, where weapons, armor, according to the terms of the game, should be almost no different from the real ones. The leftists could do with armor of any material. Usually they played in Thucker Woods, away from the people of the busy traffic on the highway. 4 years before the tragedy that happened to him, Mark had another one. That fall game weekend didn't go well. The weather was nice on Friday, but it started to rain on Saturday afternoon. What with the tournaments and sword fights. I had to pack up before the scheduled time and go home. Mark drove along the highway at a speed of about 70 kilometers per hour. There wasn't a soul on the road near the forest. Where the cyclist came from afterwards, God only knows. Because God clearly had nothing to do with it. He appeared right in front of Aderi's car. Mark braked sharply, but it was too late. The man fell to the road. Mark jumped out of the car, and in the pouring rain, like a wall, tried to lift the man. The man groaned. Aderi knew that it was absolutely impossible to lift such victims on one's own before the ambulance arrived. Not only what the man had broken, but also how to leave a man on the pavement in a downpour below, outside the city. And an ambulance in this weather could take hours to reach them. He remembered the maxim do what must be done and let it be done. And taking in his arms from the drowning young man, it turned out that the victim looked no more than 25 years old, and laid him on the back seat. The bicycle was put in the trunk. Good Auto Mark had a capacious Land Cruiser, one of the latest models. It took an hour to get to the hospital. The injured guy was immediately taken to the operating room. He was saved, but they said a Gorfer. Now they said he wouldn't be able to walk. His spine was broken. But if Mark had not brought him himself, but waited for the ambulance in the freezing rain, the young man would not have been able to sit up and would have passed into the category of bedridden patients. So he did the right thing. However, his mother, who arrived a couple hours after Mark, didn't think so. "You've ruined my boy." damn you! She was screaming at every hospital and banging her head against the wall. He's an athlete. He was supposed to compete at the regional championships next week. And here you are with your car. You'll be held responsible for this. You won't be able to walk on your own. Remember my words, screamed the grief-stricken woman. Although Mark had actually saved her boy, not killed him. And how he ended up on the highway, Aderi still couldn't figure out. He paid $3 million in damages to the family. Michael, the guy's name, had no claim on him. He was acting very strangely, hiding his eyes and refusing to see his mother. While she was in the hospital, Mark put his behavior down to stress. 2 years passed. The story began to fade into oblivion. Mark tried to contact Michael and find out how the case through the rocklet. You were a tatwell vasikiti. Ipaka ish pested dollars as he sambert warlogs how to talk to you. But the young man, along with his mother, never showed up again. Mark met Emily, fell in love. She conquered him with her beauty, intelligence, cheerful character, and absolutely no restraint in terms of spoiled by the benefits of civilization. At times, she acted almost like a movie Crocodile Dundee. He proposed to her and was going to introduce her to his family. But he didn't make it to the registry office. That day, like 2 years ago, it was raining. Only Mark himself crossed the road, leaving the car in the garage, because he planned to invite Emily to celebrate the engagement in a restaurant for two. The light turned green, and he went. All he could do was turn his head and fix his eyes on the woman's widened eyes. In the window of the car coming at him, and that was it. He woke up in the hospital. He had 3 operations. Then, the doctors threw up their hands and said it was God's will. Maybe he'll get back on his feet. Maybe he'll be an invalid for the rest of his life, but it would depend only on his will and goodwill. He threw away his SIM card and changed his phone number. The guard said that if Emily comes, to say that he urgently flew abroad and when he will be unknown. That is, everything is as the Mert suggested. Moreover, Aderi got it into his head that it was that ancient curse of the mother of the unfortunate son whom he had unwittingly sent into a wheelchair. By knocking down that rainy evening works. And no one, not even Rose, could convince him otherwise. No matter how hard she tried, however. Her sister did not give up the idea of putting her beloved brother on his feet and hired detectives through her agency in order to find this Michael, learn about his well-being and bring him to Mark by any means necessary. For some reason, she sensed a catch, an undercurrent in the case. Where had the mother and son disappeared so quickly? Why hadn't they been in touch? After all, they were aware of the state of the CRO. The family Aderi, and if Michael remained an invalid, his mother with her unfair claims and frenzied temperament would not be responsible for anything from Mark, continuing to pull money from them. $3 million, of course, is a decent sum. You can buy an apartment, but that's it. To live and be treated with paralysis in this apartment, too. Something to live on. It was strange. Into the morning, Camille subdued Adriana and went to Mark's house to give him vitamin shots, massage him, and do some probing to see how to proceed. On the small table next to the bed, she saw a picture of Emily in a bright yellow sundress, and the girl was smiling. In her hands, she held a bouquet of flowers. Who is this? Feigning surprise, she asked Mark. I'm sorry, Camille, but this is private. I'd rather not talk about it. Of course I'm sorry, it's just that she looks so much like my best friend. She's a nurse, too. Her name's Emily. Yes! We went to a spa with the kids the other day. She has a son the same age as my Adriana. He's 2 years old, too, and he has a congenital heart defect.
But we were told that it is treatable. Even surgery may not be necessary.
The pawn shop area as suddenly she heard the sound of a broken cup behind her, and within seconds a stroller with Mark in it was right in front of her. As you said, Emily is a nurse and has a 2-year-old son. In a changed voice, grabbing Camille's siren around Camille's wrist tightly. Mark asked, "And when did you two vacation together?" "Mark, let go of my hands, it hurts. 2 weeks ago, she and I were vacationing at a sanatorium. And don't look at me like that. Yes, I'm not here by chance. I was looking for you." And she told the whole story of Emily's ordeal. Adari sat like a statue. He started patting his pockets as if looking for cigarettes. Here, I've got some. I have some. I've been known to have some. After I divorced my husband, I gave him a pack of Corsair Camille cigarettes. I'll get you an ashtray. I saw it in the kitchen. I mean, I have a son and my fiancé. I didn't get crushed by the drag? Mark asked. That's right. And she couldn't betray you even if she started looking for you. You told me yourself that you gave appropriate instructions to the guards. Where are they now? I rented them a house not far from here. You rented a house? Yes, I did. I'm a secret millionaire and a philanthropist. The mayor laughed afterwards. He drove up to Camille, took her hand, and kissed it. Let's go. I'm going to get my shit together, and let's take it from here, sister. Thank you. Come on. She did not warn Emily that she was going to her mercilessly, fearing that she would simply run away. An hour later, they were at the gate of a small, pretty mansion. In the courtyard, Alec Zvonkok was playing with the dog, and Hachi was rubbing the dog by the ears. Mark suddenly appeared behind Camille, but not on a wheelchair, but on crutches. I've been practicing for 6 months. I haven't told anyone. I'm good at it. He smiled quietly at Camille and put his finger to his lips. Only to no one. But you do. Camille? What are you doing hanging in there? How's Mark? Tell me if he's okay. I want to see him so badly. You have no idea, Emily said, with longing in her voice as she approached the gate. And he will tell you himself, as he answered Camille and opened the gate. Emily was silent and stared at Mark, and he at her. It seemed like an eternity had passed. Both had tears running down their faces. Alex walked over to his mother and put his arms around her legs. Mom, don't cry. I won't, son. She took her son in her arms and held him close to her, and the tears continued to flow down her beautiful face. But here's what, my friends. Let Alex come here. I'll stay here. You need to talk. You go home. Thanks, sister, smiled Mark. Come on, get in the car. You've been in the middle of nowhere for 2 years. Emily smiled and threw herself around Mark's neck. They drove away. Camille played with the children and put them to bed. She couldn't sleep herself. She sat at the table and dreamed. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Who is it? The girl thought. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Very strange. Emily wouldn't knock. She's not really interested in me right now. Was anyone holding a gas can? Camille asked. Open up, please. I'm being chased. I need help. A suspiciously familiar voice came from behind the door. The man said something else, and Camille suddenly realized that Stephen was standing outside the gate. She opened the door and saw him shaking with fear or cold. He was wearing only his ex-husband's family underwear. Wow. And who's chasing you? Mark started laughing wildly too. Camille, it's you, my God, what a blessing! The public's after me. She caught me with my neighbor. Remember, the receptionist? She's gonna kill me. She has a heavy hand, literally bursts into the yard, wailed Stephen. Oh, I can't! Bending with laughter, wildly laughed Camille, taking the gate. Run quickly to the catcher's house. Sit there like a mouse. Now for the gate. The sound of the car can already be heard nearby. Shit, I'm in trouble! Stephen shouted and hid behind the saving door of the human dwelling. 15 minutes later, there was another knock at the gate, or rather, behind the drums. Camille gave her ex-husband her huge robe she had worn during her pregnancy, promising to supply him with a more manly version of the garment tomorrow, and opened a bottle of wine. He had made her laugh so much with his antics that she had forgiven him and regarded him as an old battle buddy. They sat in the kitchen and talked. This is Jenna, the wife. Into the pile, Stephen said. Camille, don't open it. Well, I won't open it yet, of course, but I'll talk. Or she won't leave. I got a good look at your wife at the wedding. How'd you get yourself into this mess? Who's there? Have you looked at your watch? My kids are asleep. I'm going to call the police. The Aderi mansion is right next to us. There's special security, hooligans. Young lady, no special guards. I heard a complaining voice outside the gate. Open up, please. It's Jenna. I know Stephen is here. I saw you let him in. Don't let him be afraid. I recognize you. You're Camille, his first wife. I won't corner him like that again. Just don't let him cheat in my hotel. The woman spoke in a very humble tone. And I have some spare clothes for him in the trunk. Camille started laughing again. This evening was full of surprises. Wiping away the tears from her laughter, she let Jenna in. She warned him to be quiet or he'd have a heart attack. He's scared of you. Wow, they went quietly into the house. Stephen was nowhere to be found. He was in the nursery, sitting next to Adriana's crib. When he saw the women, he smiled sadly. Hello, girls. I've been such a jerk, Camille. I'm sorry, I'll never leave you. We'll leave you without help. We won't leave you, Jenna added. Stephen, I'm sorry, I'm such a fool. They went to the kitchens and had a long talk about the future. In the morning, Mark and Emily arrived to cross happiness as two Evelyn lovers. They had already managed to apply for the registry office. Mark said that Rose called him and she had a surprise to go. Camille gathered the children, invited the Aderians and Jenna and Stephen with her. The clever couple were holding hands, smiling idiotically, in love. Oh my God, they're the perfect couple. Looking at them, Camille thought, it's not Stephen's fault. It was my accident, and we didn't love each other. We were just good together, huh? We're more like friends. But with Leosha, it's definitely passion, pride. They drove up to the house. When inside, there were two men and a woman sitting in the living room. The guards and Rose stood beside them. The man turned his head, and Mark recognized Michael, who had no wheelchair, or at least no crutches. His mother was sitting next to him. You've recovered, thank God. Have a seat on the couch, Mark said. And he, my dear brother, wasn't sick. Rose began to tell the story. He and his mommy do it that way. There's another character in the case, a doctor. Remember when you took him to the hospital, what did he tell you? What do you mean they're dealing? I don't remember what he said, but I do. Take him to hospital number 4. I have a relative who works there. Oh, right. Yeah, my dad's a relative. That's how they scam rich people. They look online to see who's got more money, what they do for fun, where they go, and then the bells. They pull some old-fashioned stunt. Whoops. And the man's under the wheels. The doctor kind of treats the patient. So in this case, you kind of believe it. Then the doctor gives a verdict that the doggy will never be again. And unless the client himself splurges. Michael's mom gets involved. She, by the way, is his real mom, though, 4 times convicted for fraud, but otherwise a nice lady. All right, well, that's enough money we can't pay it back. Spent it. What do you want from us? Smoking angrily? The woman asked. Wait a minute. What do you mean, no cure? You mean my accident had nothing to do with the curse, and I didn't cure anyone? Mark clutched his head. But that means I could be cured. That I'll walk. Emily? You don't have to give me any money back. Go in peace. I have such a joy of life. I found a wife and a son, and I'm not cursed. I don't need the money. I gave it to you sincerely. Did it come in handy? Good. Why are we sitting here? Get out of here and don't ever show these to me again. I strongly suggest you get out of town. I'm watching you personally. You mean your con man out the door about the growling and the frost. And then what happened? And then there was a Russian honey wedding. And even Stephen and Jenna drank beer. Evelyn and Wendy. Camille, of course, who was being looked at more and more often by the head of security, Mark Williams. Really, that's another story. Mark was finally back on his feet a year later. A big part of his recovery was the fact that he learned that he was innocent and there was no curse on him.